You're listening to Answers for the Family with Alan Cardoza and Matt Polacheck, only on LA Talk Radio.
Well, welcome to another edition of Answers for the Family. I'm your co-host, Dr. Matt Polacheck. Every Monday from 11 a.m. to noon Pacific time, this show will bring you special guests that can inspire, educate, and entertain while bringing answers and options to raising children today in our constantly changing future. Now, Answers for the Family will address issues such as locating your runaway teen, family crisis intervention, building self-esteem, or dealing with addictions. As I'm sure many of you expected to hear Alan's voice today, we are reminded of the reality of what he does when he's not on the air. As a licensed private investigator and crisis interventionist, he gets calls and has to respond quickly, be it locating a runaway teen, escorting a teen to a specialized program, or retrieving an abducted child. Alan is out there all the time. And I talked with him this morning and learned that once again he's been asked to locate a runaway teen that has been abducted, and she's in one of these prostitution rings. So, of course, I want to wish Alan success in rescuing this child, and hopefully we can get him back to the show safe and soon. As for today, I am very, very excited. We have our guest, John Kim, who's a licensed therapist, but he is not just a licensed therapist. He's so much more. And he's really kind of a revolutionary therapist, in my opinion. He's chose not to present himself in a typical psychologist way. He's a guy who will wear T-shirts and a jean, and he prefers a language of me too as opposed to you should. John's blogs about his shortcomings, his revelations, his view on relationships, the self-help business, and the world. He's got a motorcycle, and he just started coaching and doing therapy in a very, very unconventional way. After a while, he built himself a full private practice. He would see clients all over the world using his phone, and he'd zoom around town in his motorcycle to do sessions at coffee shops. And through this process, John was able to come up with a lot of his own concepts. He realized that there was a new way for him to help others, combining what he learned in therapy school with life coaching and using technology to be mobile and create online communities. But most importantly, he took a very, very different approach, once frowned upon by the rigid and antiquated therapy world. He practiced transparency. Now, people keep asking him why he calls himself the angry therapist, and his reply is, it's his way of saying he's human. Well, we are so excited to have this pioneer in the therapy world on today, and his new book, entitled The Angry Therapist, A No BS Guide to Finding and Living Your Own Truth. John Kim, welcome to Answers for the Family.
Wow, that's like the best intro I think I've ever had so far.
Well, I'm excited.
So thorough.
I picked up your book a couple weeks ago and I read it through. And I can say I probably read 3 or 4 books in my life more than once, and then I read it again last weekend because as a therapist, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It felt like it was like my thoughts as I was reading it. I mean, everything that you and I experienced in grad school, and you've taken it and you've formulated in today's world, which is much different than the one we were taught in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that process of becoming a therapist is broken. You know, I think it just needs a shake up, and it's very old school. So we'll see what happens. It's kind of an exciting time, you know.
And what led to was writing the book just kind of an idea that sprung from working with different people?
Yeah, it's working with teenage addicts in residential, and then online, and just working with people in unconventional ways. I try to simplify or just kind of put growth in a shot glass. I think there's a lot of fat in self-help. It can be very dense and complicated. So I'm like your average John C. student, and in order for me to understand something, it has to be really simple. So I just put it in my language, and many resonate to that because it's simplifying self-help in a way.
And the title of the book is The Angry Therapist. Where did that come about?
I went through a divorce about 7 years ago, and left with nothing. I always tell people I left with a pillow. It was a Tempur-Pedic pillow. She got the bed, and in my car. And my parents, being Koreans, they wanted to buy me something to because they felt bad for me, so they bought me a laptop, and I took it. And I decided to create a blog. I call it The Angry Therapist. I didn't put any thought into it. I thought it was kind of funny. I was definitely an angry person growing up, in my 20s, 30s, just angry because I wasn't happy. I was very lost and directionless. And I decided to pull the curtain back and just be myself and be super transparent. And I just kind of started documenting my journey and as I became a therapist and I was helping other people and my revelations and it kind of it took off, and I think people resonated to this guy just jeans, t-shirt, like you were saying, just riding his motorcycle, meeting people in parks and coffee shops and talking about his quote unquote talking feelings.
There's to me there's a quote like being real, like a realness to you and your approach. But this is different than traditional therapy, and this idea of transparency. Did that come about because you had a lot of success in kind of just being who you were, or is this something that can be replicated? Or talk to me a little about that and what's your idea of transparency?
Yeah. I think that when you go through the clinical route, you're kind of taught to be very neutral, and you're not supposed to disclose a lot about yourself and all that, which I get because it's all about the client. But I think that when you are transparent and you are showing yourself, and not to make it about you, but kind of showing people who you are, it produces glue, it produces trust, it produces that relatability factor. And I just learned through my experimenting as a therapist / life coach that is kind of soil, that's the foundation. And I think that it's so important when working with people to build that trust and for them to be able to relate to you. And the only way to do that is just to be authentic and be you and, share your story a little bit.
To me, it puts you at a more vulnerable place and a more real, authentic place, which I think a lot of people can relate to. The book itself, and I don't, I want everyone to go out there and buy it, and I don't want to ruin it, but there's a lot of things that when I was reading it, my ears popped up. And I do want to go into some of those things. And one of the things you said in the book, which I thought was fascinating, is that our purpose in life is not to be happy, but it's to be useful. And when I think about our current society, where there's learned optimism, and every self-help book is about happiness. Your book is completely, to me, a wonderful self-help book, and we'll get into that. But the focus is not on being happy in life.
Yeah, I think happy is there's like a mirage factor. That happy is just generic, and it's one of those words that we glamorize and we chase. I think to be quote unquote happy, you have to be fulfilled. If you don't feel fulfilled and whole, having a sense of value, then it's very hard to be happy. I've learned that things outside of self, like objects and seeking approval, validation, none of that leads to happiness. In my 20s, I was chasing shiny things. It wasn't until I became a therapist and started helping others where I found fulfillment, found value, and that leads to a happy state.
And when you're reading, when I'm looking at Martin Seligman, and he's writing, Learn Optimism, and a lot of these focuses are on happiness. For me, it's similar to you. I almost feel like it's a phrase that, it's so subjective in nature. And I think that's part of the issue with our field is everything is so subjective. But to have purpose and meaning in your life, which you talk about, it leads right into my favorite quote of the book. And it's in to paraphrase it, it's discussing on what our focus should be on is how we're remembered versus how we're perceived. And you go into the book and say that, we're so focused on how we're perceived, and then in that sense, all we're looking for is validation. Whereas, by being more focused on how we'll be remembered, it's a completely different way of approaching life.
Yeah, and I think, I talk a lot about giving and taking and turning your dials. And I think that, when just because we're nice, it doesn't mean that we're giving. When we are seeking something from someone else, that's conditional. So if it's validation or approval or membership or something, even though what we may be doing is nice, we are actually taking because we want something from the other person. Truly giving is about not wanting anything, but, offering your gifts and we're living a very through-me life, so you're helping people, but not wanting anything really back. That makes sense.
Yeah, but to me, it seems like such a hard mountain to climb. When I'm working with patients, it feels like to me we almost have this human nature for validation, and to get to the point it's almost like to get to the point you're talking about. That's a pretty steep hill to have people get to.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, I struggle with it too. I'm 43, and I think it's one of those lifetime journeys. I don't think it's something that comes early. I think it comes with a lot of turbulence in life and going through expired relationships and revelations. And I think there's a difference between living a for me or a to me life and a through me life. And I think that difference is the between giving and taking. A lot of people live a very to me life. They live very victim mode, big ego. It's not until later in life where you start to have less ego and you start to live a through life. So it's almost like you're a vessel or a messenger, and the powers bigger than you are working through you to reach and be fulfilled.
John, we're experiencing a minor technical issue. We're going to call you right back. This is Dr. Matt Polacheck, co-host of Answers for the Family. We are experiencing a minor technicality, and we'll be right back.
Founded over 25 years ago to meet the needs of families in crisis, West Shield specializes in resolving adolescent issues that negatively impact the family. From preteen to young adult, we are experienced and qualified to help. We offer solutions which include referrals to a network of top professionals internationally that we work very closely with in the fields of educational consulting, psychology, and psychiatry. Our in-home crisis intervention care program helps to stabilize families and bring effective resolution. We are supported by our licensed investigation company that enables us to offer legal and expert services for locating runaway teens and more. Our therapeutic transportation services help to ensure that adolescents in crisis are safely provided transportation to specialized schools and programs with unmatched experience and success. Simply put, West Shield Adolescent Services is the best solution when your family is facing personal crisis. Call 1-800-899-8585 and let us help you.
Welcome back to Answers with the Family. We are here with John Kim, author of The Angry Therapist. And John, sorry, you got cut off a little bit there.
Yeah, no worries. What part got cut off?
We were discussing the for me and the kind of transferring the way, we look at things, being perceived as,
Yeah, being remembered. Yeah, I think there's different mindsets. And I think there's, like the to me and the for me and the by me, those type of mindsets where there's big ego and a lot of taking. And I think the through me mindset is when you are more like a vessel or a messenger and you're allowing powers greater than yourself to work through you to really give and to reach people. And I think in that state, you feel the most fulfilled. It's almost like when you don't make it about you is when, the universe does, kind of thing.
Yeah, but it seems like our culture is all about me and getting likes and all that. So it's like going against the current.
And that's why it's so hard.
And so we've got this culture that, is preaching really the opposite of what's the most helpful for us or healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I struggle with that too. I think it's advertising, it's culture, it's media, since kids we've been exposed to it, so it's a lot of conditioning. And then there's social pressures in high school and all of that stuff. So it's something that you can't avoid. It's around you constantly, and I just know that it's a powerless type of living if you allow it to have power over you.
Yeah,
billboards and advertising, all that.
Versus being more empowered and being in more control. Kind of continuing on that light, the book talks a lot about how, when we judge other people, it actually increases our anxiety. But to me, and I agree with that, but it's almost like a human nature to judge other people, even though it's a negative and it doesn't help. How do you see it as, increasing anxiety when we constantly judge other people or compare ourselves to others?
I think whenever we're trying to trace a blueprint or we're comparing, there's an evaluation process, and rarely do we compare and think that we're better or prettier or, smarter. It's usually the other way where we always feel less than, because we don't compare ourselves to people that have less than us or that are less attractive or that are less successful. We're always comparing ourselves to people that, we believe have more. So it's like we fall into this slippery well of just constantly feeling less than,
It's amazing you say that. I was reading a study by the Girl Scouts of America this morning, and that it was saying just that I think it was 8 out of 10 Girl Scouts feel that, based on reading fashion magazines, they wish they were skinnier. And I think it was 35% of them admitted to starving or refusing to eat in order to get that way.
Yeah, and I've worked in many eating disorder clinics and run groups for women who have eating disorders, and it's real. It becomes a disease, an obsession, and especially with social media and Instagram and also filtered photographs, it's just creating it's a fantasy world that we're striving for that is very empty. That's a cul-de-sac. It doesn't lead to anything other than evaluating ourselves and bashing ourselves.
This is interesting. As you're speaking, Claire from San Diego writes in, which is exactly what we're talking about. I'm constantly wanting to understand human behavior, and I'm concerned that our world, we're so obsessed with people like the Kardashians, who are basically operating off the id. We have another psychologist, it looks like, at all times. Why do I feel anger towards these celebrities, and why am I also so drawn to them? Thank you, Claire, by the way.
Oh, sorry, guys.
Oh, no, I was just thanking Claire for writing us in here. I appreciate it. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think that we all have a pseudo side and a solid side, and I think that whatever we feel that we are lacking, we seek in others. So when you have the Kardashians, there's something about her or her life or what she has or what she represents or that idea that I think a lot of people are attracted to, because they don't, they're trying to fill holes in themselves. So if they can't be that person, they're going to want to, watch that person or be around that person or, gravitate toward that person in their life in a certain way. And I think that's why she has, such a huge following.
That's amazing. So it's almost like what we're seeking is the opposite of what this book is teaching us. We're seeking, again, external things, items, right, versus being a useful human being. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's our natural default, and that's not our go-to. That's our natural. We have to actually be aware of it and go against that to hit a higher potential.
And so
I think what happens is we turn invisible. So whenever we're seeking, whenever we're comparing, whenever we feel less than, and the more that we do it, and the more that we try to fulfill our holes with other people, then we become invisible and grayed out. I think that going the other way is what makes you very potent and living higher at your potential, unique and different, and
And do you find yourself, the more you practice this, comparing yourself less to others? I mean, have you noticed a reduction personally with kind of trying to attain this?
Yeah, and for me, the tipping point was it's like I've had two lives. I used to be in entertainment as a screenwriter, and I ran a restaurant bar in Hollywood that was very scenic for a while. So I lived in my 20s and 30s. I lived a very approval-seeking, exchanging my truth for membership, wanting to be one of the cool kids. Like, I lived all that, and I was very invisible. I was kind of like a leaf floating around in the world. And it wasn't until I lost everything, started all over, and after the divorce, started being a therapist, where I decided that I'm not going to seek anymore, but I'm just going to be me, be authentic, be transparent, show the world who I am, let my voice be heard, and let's see what happens. And what happened was I found purpose. What happened was, I built a team. I created a movement. Like all this stuff happened organically just because of that one shift of thinking different.
So this divorce really was a turning point in your life, and you took something that for most people, can be catastrophic, destructive, all the above, and you really it sounds like you really grew out of it.
I did, and it's like Steve Jobs says, you can't connect dots until you're looking back. And at the time, it was crazy, it was painful, it was lonely, it was miserable, and all that. But looking back, it was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. It was the catalyst to my rebirth, and pulling more from my solid self instead of pseudo.
You also in the book talk about a container. For those out there who wouldn't understand that concept, will you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, I use a lot of my own language, my own verbiage, and I don't do it for the sake of it. It's just how I speak and how I see the world. And the container concept is, I believe that we all have our own containers. It's kind of like our life space, and I believe that most people have cracked containers. That's due to their, the trauma or past relationships or faulty thinking. And whenever there's cracks in your container, it stunts your growth. So, for example, if you are in an abusive relationship where you're getting punched in the face, that's a very cracked container that's going to stunt your growth. I believe that we can build brand new containers for ourselves. And I believe that when you do, that growth becomes organic. We're evolving creatures. We're curious. We're not like stagnant in that way. So as long as you create a safe space, a safe life space for you, and that's what my book's about, how to do that, growth is exponential and growth happens. So it's just the idea that all you have to do then at that point is just live different.
Was the intention of The Angry Therapist to be a self-help book? Because as I read it, I felt personally like it definitely helped me. And I felt as I was reading it, there's so many specific points in there and ideas of how to live your life that it felt like it was, I call it a backdoor self-help book, in the sense where it wasn't advertised as a quote self-help book per se, but it was a true self-help book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's almost like my book is almost like a mini version of my 7-year-long blogging journey, kind of taking the highlights and what I've learned and putting it, into what I call a shot glass. I didn't set out to, even when I got the book deal, I just kind of fell. I never set out to do that. It wasn't until recently that I even consider myself a writer, which is kind of funny. I guess that's a compliment. Is I think if you set out to write a self-help book, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself. If you set out to tell the story and things that you've learned, it kind of becomes the backdoor self-help book in disguise, and I think that's great.
And we have we're getting a lot of therapists today. We have Aaron, who I think is a therapist, writing in from Kansas City, that said, "How refreshing to read about your approach to dealing with clients. I'm a therapist who burned out a couple years ago to travel and regroup. Rather than change professions, maybe your example is one I need to consider. Maybe I just need to change the way I go about it. I am very much looking forward to reading your book, and I do have one question. What is your thoughts on the nature versus nurture debate?"
Well, first, let's talk about the whole,
regroup.
I think so. What was interesting is when I was on my way to becoming a therapist, I lived two lives. So my one life was working in the clinical settings, the shirt and tie, the residential, just being a very quote unquote therapist, doing offices and stuff like that. And then when I came home and I was blogging. So in the clinical world, I felt like I was pushing a milk cart. I felt like Clark Kent. And then when I came home and I was blogging and I was John Kim, I was very myself, I felt like Superman. And so I listened to that, the feeling of wearing a cape because you are just being you and this is how you believe you can help people. And that led to, doing things that as a therapist you're not supposed to. Like, for example, the webcam, in California, you're only supposed to see people in your own state, and I was getting people all over the world, and I didn't want to, so then I just put the hat on as a life coach, and I decided to help them because with the internet comes, such wide reach. And then meeting people like on walks and hikes and stuff like that. Most therapists don't do stuff like that. I decided to play around in that space, and I think that's where you have the greatest connection and less burnout, because now you're doing things that are honest to you, and you're working in ways that are just exciting and different, and you're not sitting in a room, with someone on the couch hour after hour after hour,
And you feel probably a lot more present, right? I mean, you feel a lot more present in these sessions that because they're a lot more authentic.
Yeah, and it's like if we're going to talk about life, let's do life while we're talking.
Yeah. And so maybe this therapist, that is something to consider, is to alter their practice.
Sure. And I think that, and I don't know if you can relate to this, when we, go through the clinical route, we're kind of trained and programmed to not do that. So if we start doing something like that, we feel maybe guilty, or we're doing something wrong, or there's fear. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that and it's, again, the nature of our field is so subjective that we're all taught specific ways. And when I'm reading the book, I read a lot of kind of CBT intervention stuff that I was trained with. But I think at the end of the day, the connection is so important. And I think that young therapists
absolutely.
are so worried about being, quote, good therapists that they don't pay attention to that part of it.
Yeah, you actually hit the nail on the head. That it all starts with connection. But, any relationship starts with connection. And especially when you're working with someone about their life and they're trusting you with their story, without the connection, you have nothing. Then you're just someone who's giving a lecture,
Yeah, hard to get anywhere there. And then what's your take? What's your take on the nature nurture question from Aaron?
In what way?
It's a good question. I don't know. He basically at the end of the email said, I need to change the way I go about it. I'm very much looking forward to reading your book. And one question, what's your thoughts on nature? That's pretty general, actually.
Yeah, I think, and I always try to bring it back to my story and how I can relate to it. I think that our upbringing, I think that our own containers, our family space, how we were raised, all the shit that's happened to us in the past, I think it forms us. I mean, I think it wires us a certain way, creates false beliefs and all that. My parents didn't create they did the best they could. They didn't create a lot of space for me to express my feelings or, a lot of I love yous. Part of that is cultural, just being kind of Korean, old school. And I think that, stuff like that, as I grew up, affected me. I think stuff like that is definitely came out in who I was. The good news, though, is that you could be aware of that and start to rewire yourself and change. That's why it's like my 20s and 30s, I was a completely different person than I am now at 43. And it was because I kind of made that transition. So, yeah, I think nature plays a huge part. Nurture, your family upbringing and the relationships and how you're raised creates a huge part in the early stages of just how you're going to do with relationships in life,
I almost, as you say that, I agree, but I also see as you being open and being willing to change and to grow, whereas I see where other people it might confirm or validate them acting a certain way or being a certain way, and then then their return would be lack of growth. So it's almost a willingness. Right. I agree. I mean, I think that our early childhood experiences obviously play such a big role. And I look at like the ACE study that Kaiser did, where we see that, traumatic events or, specific events in early childhood later on could actually have physical implications. And it seems like, our upbringing can play such a role, but it can play if we don't grow, even though we're physically, our brains are growing through our mid-20s and all that we know, and we can change and grow and all that, and nature has a wonderful impact. But if we're not willing to, it can also further whatever pathology we have.
Yeah, absolutely.
When
and I think that I think that's why a lot of us start turning the corner. 30s, mid-30s. It's not until around then where you actually have the tools to be aware. I think a lot of our 20s is just a residue of how we were brought up and a lot of reactions. We don't start responding until later in life.
It's amazing, and to have the patience, I guess, with people you work with or children that you have. To know, I completely 100% agree with you. Where I'm at now and where I'm at 20 years ago are two different places. And I even when I was, a teenager, I noticed when I was 17 to 15 or 19 to 17, I couldn't believe the way I thought or acted compared to as, we evolve as people. And I feel like for parents, sometimes it's hard to hang on and wait because, you just like me, I was in a adolescent substance abuse residential center just like you, and if we saw these kids 5 years later, 7 years later, it's a total different presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. And which is the beauty of being human is that people can have transformation, people can change. It's great. It's inspiring to see people be very different than who they were before.
Do you think that the people do believe that, though, as our culture believes that we can change? Or do you think you and I are just optimists?
Well, change. You know what's tough is secondary change. Change that's not reversible. I think that a lot of people, it's like yo-yo dieting. I think they change kind of on the surface, or their behavior changes, and then then something happens and they snap back to kind of who they used to be. I think this idea of really changing from the inside out and being different it takes time, and it's rare. Like I think you're right. I think a lot of people, especially with self-help, it's like something they read about. They go to seminars. They kind of digest it as information, but they don't really change. They don't do the work. They don't do the other half of the coin, which is execution. Action steps.
Yeah, in the book, I know it talks about that. The other thing it says about change in the book is you say that everything starts with how you feel, and it's the birthplace of change. What did you?
I think just working with clients and also just being in relationships with different people who grew up without that space of expressing themselves, and so like they basically internalize and they keep it all inside, and then they cope with their vices, whatever that may be, and that's just kind of the progress of us being in this world. And I think that unless you're able to finally express yourself, because when you're expressing yourself, you're telling yourself you exist, that growth is impossible. Like if you don't express your state and how you feel, and you're not honest with yourself, it's so slippery. There's nothing to build on.
When I was reading the book, I think about thoughts and feelings, and I think of along the lines of cognitive behavioral therapy and having kind of maladaptive thoughts, and having feelings are kind of what they are, and you can't help them. But some thoughts are wrong, they're illogical, or they're right. Where are you with that, with working with people? Because I feel like it's weird to sit across from someone and basically tell them that their thoughts are wrong.
Yeah, it's because of our cognitive distortions. It's because there's that famous saying that we see the world as we are, not as it is. Yeah, and it's so true. I think that most of us, and we have about 60,000 thoughts a day. Most of those thoughts are negative. They're worrying, they're dread, or they're about the past, or things that you could have, or they're comparing, or judgment. And so it's like, all that stuff is what I think pushes us down, and also disconnects us from feeling, and also behind negative thoughts, or behind thoughts where we feel less than or defective, there's going to be negative feelings attached to that. So it's that cycle of just unhealthy thinking that I think is so common. And if you could break that cycle, it just changes everything. And
hearing you talk, for me, the first response I feel is, so the key really is just being present, being in the now. What's in front of you is what's in front of you almost. Is that fair?
That's fair, and that's very, that's kind of the big flag that wellness is waving today. But it sounds simple, but it's not. And I'm saying that from my own experience, even now today. Even though I feel like I have some tools to control my thoughts and be present, it's a fight. It's a practice. It's something that you have to work at daily and take it in as a lifestyle, not just something that you do once in a while.
It'll be fascinating the more you and I kind of get our voices out there and communities to work on these things long term. What kind of impact can we have if we raise young adults and people in a world where they're kind of working on, like, what you would call a solid self, I guess. Like you would call a solid self. Actually, that's a good transition. Tell us a little about what the concept of solid self.
It's the truth. It's you. It's who you are. I always compare it to there's a movie called Fight Club, one of my favorite movies, and Edward Norton. I'll give there's a spoiler alert, just FYI. But Edward Norton and Brad Pitt. The movie is about inner conflict. It's one person, and Edward Norton is very pseudo in the beginning because he's lost and has insomnia. He's buying IKEA furniture and whatever. And then he meets Brad Pitt, which is his solid self. And because he starts listening to that side, he becomes a leader. He finds a movement, he falls in love, and he actually finds his voice and empowerment and all that. So I think it's just a great metaphor for how we are, is that we have that solid self. And the solid self is usually the quiet voice. It's the one that it's the whisper that we never listen to. And then we have our pseudo self, and that's the side that's liking all of Kim Kardashian's posts and spending money on name brands and consumerism and advertising and all that. And I think our pseudo self is the most powerful side, and we have to eclipse that, and it takes time, by pulling from our solid instead of our pseudo. And I also think that it's, no one's 100% solid. It's just Jesus or Buddha, or everyone has that inner conflict constantly. And it depends where you're at. You may be very solid with your kids, you may be very you and authentic and not seeking anything, and being very present. But then at work, you may be very pseudo, So I think throughout your day, think about where you're solid, where you're pseudo, and why. And then the work would be to try to pull from your solid self, see what happens. And, you may surprise yourself that, oh, nothing bad happened. Or actually, I spoke out today and I got compliments. And then it's giving yourself those experiences where you start leaning more into your solid, because, experiences are very convincing. And then you start to believe something different.
Would you recommend people actually write down, their meaning and value of what the solid self would look like versus the pseudo self? Would that be a helpful exercise?
Sure.
Or?
I think that'd be great, yeah, to actually write down and to see that person and how that person thinks and what he or she likes and what he or she deserves and all, and to create like a three-dimensional person, I think would be really helpful, absolutely.
One of the things that, I heard you describe yourself as is a lifestyle designer. Is this kind of play into that, helping people create this world, or where did the lifestyle designer come from?
Yeah, I don't like the word therapy. I don't like, because I think there's judgment behind it. Life coach is an interesting word, but I like this idea of let's redesign your life. I think that things are built and we can rebuild or redesign your life, and to me that makes more sense. And so I don't know if I came up with it or if someone called me that one day and I liked it. Is that I'm a life designer.
For people listening, and you being their life designer, where would, besides obviously getting the book, what are some things that people listening in could do right away to start this process? Just going back to a solid and pseudo, I think the first thing you can do is, nothing is built without truth, and that means not only being honest with others but yourself. So knowing when you're solid and seeking approval, validation, membership, that's pseudo. Knowing when you're pseudo, knowing when you're solid, and knowing why, and just making a decision to, ask yourself, what would it look like to be solid? What would that look like in action? How would I be in relationships? How would I treat my husband, my wife, my kids if I was more solid? And then leaning into that and actually giving yourself new experiences in that way, It seems like a lot of this stuff is assessment-based and taking the time to ask yourself questions about how you want to live your life and how you're living your life in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think we don't ask ourselves those questions.
No.
We are too busy worrying about taxes and paychecks and the grocery list.
It's amazing. We, my company, I'm the director at the Betty Ford Center here in West LA, and one of the things we do is a concept called rounding, where we ask our staff members, what's working, what's not working. And I asked my wife the other day, I came home and I said to her, so what's working well in our relationship or our marriage? And she gave me a look like, she was so shocked that I asked that question.
Yeah.
And it's true. We don't do enough assessment of ourselves, the relationships we're in, and how can we improve and get better if we're not, there's no accountability and no assessment.
Yeah, and I applaud you for asking your wife that. I think that's great. I think that's what, building relationships look like.
Well, I phrased it in a way I could only get a positive answer. I said, what's working well?
Well, yeah. I mean, but maybe you did that purposely. Maybe you wanted to keep it positive and not, what's not working and go down that whole road.
Yeah, there's ways of phrasing questions that end up with a nice answer, right?
Yeah, but listen, I don't think. As long as your intention's good, I think that's great. I think that angle, works. What's positive in our relationship, and then as you have that conversation, you maybe will be reminded on how valuable or how far you guys have come or what you built. I think it's great.
And as far as doing, setting this to practice in your life with your patients, have you noticed a difference in, because you really shifted from being more of a, in the office traditional therapist to an online practice and, outside the walls of the, the rooms. Have you noticed it been been more beneficial, less beneficial, the same? Any differences?
So when I first started, there were still people on dial-up, and the webcam was very. It looked like people were breakdancing because it would, freeze and then move and freeze and move. But now, I mean, you can literally just get on the phone, and it's. The quality is so amazing now that. You could see a teardrop, and so I think, that being said, there's nothing better than in person. In person, because that's the ultimate, you can't get more accurate than that. But I think that because of technology and webcams and everything, you can now be a conduit into anyone's home anywhere around the world, which is like, who wouldn't take advantage of that? So like your reach has just, there's no roof. It's like, you can reach anyone at any time, and I think that is such a powerful tool that how can we not use that to help people?
And for you, it'll be fascinating because you're, aside from a psychologist, therapist, coach, thinker, writer. I'm interested to talk with you in a couple of years and notice if you start noticing themes in certain areas or in different cultures, because you've opened up your walls now to work with people really all over the world. And that'll be fascinating to me to see, what solid self looks like in our country versus other countries. Do you predict, individuals' culture versus collectivist cultures? Do you predict a lot of differences in the people you work with, or is kind of humans' plight?
I do. I think that it's a really good time for this whole being solid or a better version of yourself or living at higher potential, because wellness has kind of become commercialized now. I think wellness, back in the day, you only saw your therapist if you were quote unquote crazy, or like with our parents, it was kind of embarrassing or shameful. Now it's a luxury, and now everyone has a life coach, and now yoga, meditation, and some of the stuff we're talking about, being present. It's so mainstream now that I think it's breaking a lot of cultural barriers.
And for you, what's, you got The Angry Therapist out now, and I assume it's on Amazon and all the major online shops. What's next for you?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It comes out April 17th. So
it's not out?
A month. Yeah, no. You could get a pre-order now, but it's not out for about a month.
Oh, so I got lucky, didn't I?
Yeah, sure. I got lucky. I got lucky that you have me on before my book comes out. But what's next for me is I want to hopefully use the book as a ticket into doing some speaking gigs, just getting out there and just spreading my message and sharing my story. Shows and the stuff that I'm doing like today, and just keep talking and creating a dialogue about this stuff,
And you had mentioned you're building a team.
Yeah, we have a startup called Shift, and we have a team. We have developers, and it's an online platform where we're changing lives through this idea of tribes. So the other big belief I have is that we're not meant to do life alone, and I found the power of that in working in residential treatment. And you're at Betty Ford, so I'm sure you see it too. Group work. And so we have these tribes, and basically you could go through whatever topic, whether it's divorce recovery or addiction or anything, all through your phone for a certain amount of time, led by a life coach or a therapist. And we call them tribes. And it's kind of like that movie Breakfast Club, where there's all these strangers that come in because of common theme, and then they leave super close and changed. And we're able to do that online. So they're like virtual support groups called Tribes.
What a beautiful concept. For me, I worked in residential and adolescent residential in Betty Ford. I was a private practice therapist, similar to you. And that was one of the things that I noticed is with addiction and with other things, one-on-one is helpful, but there's something magical about the group. There's something that a group can do.
There's power in it.
It's amazing. And to me, someone once, I was having an argument with someone that was discussing like addiction and saying, well, now they just go to like AA, and aren't they addicted to AA? And my feeling was, I found that if you're, pro-dependent or interdependent on people, that's not such a bad thing in this world, is to be able to lean on others.
No, that's what it's about.
Right. That's living.
We're human.
So,
we're not meant to do life alone, and I think that we need to get back to that. So I think the power of community is huge, especially in addiction and other areas where we feel so alone.
And for those listening out there, aside from April, when's the book come out?
The book comes out in April, early April, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, anything,
So
any final thoughts or advice for people out there that aren't going to be able to read the book for the next few weeks, kind of start them off in their journey here?
Oh yeah, come over to Shift. We also have a life coaching course. We have communities. We have a lot of free stuff. Just come to Shift, shft.us, not .com, and you can find everything I'm doing, what I'm doing, or you can just go to angertherapist.com and see all my stuff there. But there's funnels that'll bring you into our community, and we'll give you something that you want, or that you may need, or that you may want to work on, and all different ways to do it.
John, it was such a pleasure. I was looking forward to meeting you, and I love the book, and I'm very thankful that you were able to come on the show.
No, thank you so much. Yeah, and if I get a chance, I'd love to come visit you at the Betty Forts, and I love what you guys are doing over there.
I would love it. We'll see you soon then. And come on again the show when you write your next book.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Matt.
Thanks so much. And for all you listeners out there, please be sure to put us on your calendar and tune in next Monday, March 13th. We've got Give It a Go, Eat a Rainbow. Our guest is Catherine Goulet. She credits her family for her continued passion for nutrition and healthy living. And if you missed or you want to share our show with your friends, please visit our archives of past interviews at answersforthefamily.com. You may also subscribe or resubmit your name to download your free copy of the Attitude of Gratitude Journal, your 21-day guide to achieving the quality of thankfulness through self-discovery. And the next time you're on Facebook and Twitter, please remember to stop by our page and check out some of our latest posts. And if you like them, please like us and spread the word. Hopefully, Alan will be back next week. I'm looking forward to him. We want to thank John Kim again for being with us. And for all you out there, have a great and wonderful day. And thanks for listening to Answers for the Family.
You're listening to Answers for the Family with Alan Cardoza and Matt Polacheck, only on LA Talk Radio.